What's up, Browns fans? Spencer German with you. Clearly not in London. And Anthony Moeglin, clearly not in London. He's back on the home front in Cleveland as we react to a disappointing Browns loss to the Minnesota Vikings over across the pond. And I think disappointing is probably the best way to sum it up, Megs, because, man, it felt like for, 56 minutes, the Browns had this one in the bag. And they were going to be coming home 2-3, and people were going to be celebrating a really nice debut as a starter for Dylan Gabriel. And it all came crashing down in that final drive of the game. Defense just could not get one more stop. And there's a number of different angles, obviously, to attack this thing. But we'll obviously start with the Gabriel part of this here in just a second. But, yeah, just obviously tough because it felt like the desired results that Kevin Stefanski wanted for this team with the quarterback change were going to play out in front of us, and that just didn't happen. By the way, just remind you guys, we are part of Cleveland Browns Roundtable. That'd be nice if I could speak today. Roundtable.io/sports/NFL/Browns, where you can find our written content. My column just went up about 20 minutes ago or so over there, so be sure to check that out. Maybe a little longer ago than that. Either way, as I sort of reacted to the Gabriel part of this as well in that column. But also check out our community posts. You can sort of react to things that were happening in real time during the game. And, yeah, so find us here on our YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. And Megs, just an unfortunate way for that game to end the day, obviously, over in London.
Yeah, it just sucks. They played well enough to win the football game. I don't think either of those teams, had they won the game, I don't think either of those teams come back to America thinking, oh, yeah, we're world beaters. But, for a Browns team that's struggling, that's young, that's trying to just keep the season alive, keep the heartbeat going on the season, a win today would have been nice. It would have been nice. And, it's funny, those last 4 minutes, that flight home, the difference between a flight home after a win and the flight home after a loss for an 8-hour trip home is pretty significant. And it all flipped on itself in the last 4 minutes because, regardless of how solid I think the defense was up and down, and we'll get into it in a little bit, but regardless of how solid they were throughout the third quarter and, for 8 minutes of the fourth quarter or 11 minutes of the fourth quarter, they really pissed down their leg on that last drive, and Carson, allowing Carson Wentz to go 80 yards with relative ease is fairly unacceptable, and that's a tough pill to swallow for this Browns team coming off of that loss.
Yeah, no, I think that's described. I think you described it really well. Just kind of how it was a roller coaster, I think, in a number of areas. Certainly with the defensive side of things, we'll get to that. The story has to be Dylan Gabriel, though, obviously, to start off the bat here, because he was making his first quarterback ever to make their debut in an international game. By the way, listen, this was not a light up the stat sheet performance by him. I know he had 190 yards. He completed about 57% of his passes. Not a great completion percentage. There were certainly some balls that were a little high. Maybe that's first to start jitters type thing. And so he missed some guys for sure. But the most important things that I think come out of this for him are that A, he protected the football. Mm-hmm. B, he orchestrated the offense in structure from a pretty poised standpoint. He was poised. He was methodical. He looked confident in what the Browns were asking him to do. I thought Kevin Stefanski called a very you could call it conservative, I think, game just in general for him. But rightfully so. You're starting a rookie quarterback for the first time, and you want to give him, just a chance to be comfortable. And they ran the football a ton. Quinshon Judkins was great. We'll talk about him for sure. And they were just trying to kind of make this offense look competent, and it did. They put up 17 points. I thought they were finally going to score 20 points. They seemed like they were guaranteed to score 20 points at one point in that game, and then they just didn't get it done. But in the grand scheme of things, you lead 3 scoring drives, offense, the desired result that Kevin Stefanski was looking for was for the offense to look like it could compete at the NFL level. I think he got that today, and Gabriel deserves a lot of credit for that. He made some really good throws. I think his best throw of the day was that layered throw to David Njoku on the last drive before the half. It was 12 yards down to was it? I can't remember if it was 12 or 17 yards or whatever, but it was really nicely done to kind of get him in the red zone, set him up for the field goal that Andre Schmidt makes to go up 10-7 at the half. I mean, bracketed coverage, high and low on him, and it was perfectly placed. So I think at the very least, Megs, like fans, yes, it's a tough loss, but I think fans leave with at least being intrigued by what Dylan Gabriel showed you today and feeling like there's something viable there at the quarterback position for him.
Yeah, no doubt. And then just to make sure we're clear here, 17 yards. So you go with your gut.
Okay.
17-yard completion. It set the Browns up at the 9-yard line. That whole sequence was pretty interesting. We won't get into too much detail of it, but I thought the Browns got really weird there. They used a run play, then into a timeout, and then there's kind of a couple things there that I thought were odd.
Well,
but,
I'll say real quick, Mays. I'll say this really quickly. There was also questions about why Quinshon Judkins wasn't in the game for a lot of that sequence. After the game, he didn't really give a good answer. I shared it on my Twitter at @Spencito_. He basically was like, "Yeah, we really trust Jerome Ford in those situations. We also were being mindful of Quinshon's usage, but like you obviously want your best running back in there for that stage of the game." But anyway, continue.
Yeah, no, that was a weird sequence there, but like on the Dylan front, I'd say solid. There's a couple gotta have it scenarios, and like. Everyone's going to remember that 3rd and 8 that it looked like him and Isaiah Bond were on two like separate pages. Like Isaiah was running like a sharp cutout and Dylan I'll do it on the screen. So like Isaiah thought he was running a sharp cut and Dylan thought he was running more of that high angle, like corner type deal because that ball missed. I mean, that looked like a JV miss, right? JV high school miss. So it was definitely two different pages, but the whole fourth quarter just, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth because the Browns defense, you should feel like they did enough to win the football game. They forced 2 turnovers. They don't hold they don't hold Justin Jefferson down at all. That dude, he's sick, man. He's unbelievable. He's unbelievable.
I tweeted during the game, like sometimes there's just really good players that make plays in this league. I mean, he had that one catch over Denzel. It's like best on best. It was just a great player making a great play. Like you just kind of tip your hat on that one. But yeah, he's just a brilliant player.
Yeah, just nothing you can do. But like the defense has to feel like they've done enough, and they up 17-14, and they had like 3 drives in a row where they probably should have shut it down. Like their fourth quarter drive chart is punt, 3 plays punt, 3 plays punt, 5 plays punt, 3 plays punt, 3 plays end of game. So it's like we're gonna look at that last drive and see, hey. Or that second to last drive and be like, ooh, he may have that miss there. But, I go back to the 3 before it. Like all 3 of those were equally important in closing out the game. And, that's obviously the next step up for a young quarterback. But, man, it just would have been so nice to get it done today. I thought he was good. Good, not great. Saw some really good things. Saw some things you kind of went back. But like you said, the ball was protected for the most part. Got into some good checks. That there's a big Quinshon run after the holding. I believe it was on that 5-play drive, 10-yard penalty, 11-yard pass, 14-yard run. Yeah, with about 8:30 left that he audibled into. That was like, oh yeah, here we go. Browns are going to go drive and at least put points on the board. They didn't do it. Come out with a loss. I'm rambling a little bit, but just some good, some bad, there from Dylan.
I think that's a good way to sum it up in general. I will say this, like it did feel like some of the things that went wrong for Dylan today are correctable. Like high throws, some of that's like miscommunications with receivers, just getting on the same page. So I think that's another reason why intriguing is a good word to use, because there was a lot to like from today that makes you feel like he can be a solid player in the NFL or a potential starting quarterback for this team in some capacity. And so I think fans should leave feeling somewhat happy about that, even in a loss. But I think solid is a good word to use. There's certainly room for growth. It wasn't a perfect performance, not that you expected it to be completely perfect. There's things to correct, but you got to like, I think in general, what Dylan brought to the table today. And it stinks that it ended the way that it did, because it felt like he was doing enough. I agree with you. Like the second half was just kind of brutal. You can't really move the footballs effectively. The run game, they couldn't quite pick up a couple short yardage, 3rd and 4th downs. And then, not turning that second fumble into any points was also disappointing, because this was a game where, I mean, they always throw out the stat, right? Like teams that lose the turnover battle or whatever the record is, it heavily favors the team that wins it. Teams that win the turnover battle should usually win. So the fact that the Browns won the turnover battle today, but they didn't win, is more of a rare thing. And, it's got to be sort of frustrating, because it was like you did everything you were supposed to do. You create a couple extra opportunities, and it just didn't equate to points in the end that the Browns needed. So, Yeah, I think frustrating is a good way to sort of sum up the game as a whole, but I do think solid is a good way to sum up Gabriel's performance. I think there's something to build upon here for sure moving forward for this Browns team.
And Germ, I would also add too that, like, they were we talked about it last night, or I guess it came out this morning. Facing Brian Flores is tough for any quarterback. It's especially tough for a rookie quarterback, and you kind of saw the fruits of that today. Like, he switched it up in the second half, made it really challenging, and Dylan did what he could with it. The biggest part was the ball was never in danger. Like, there was maybe one pass that had defenders' hands on it, but for the most part, the ball was safe. It was okay, and you honestly come out of it feeling like the defense, did enough to win the football game, and the offense did like 95% enough to win the football game, and they come out losing. We thought week one was a very Browns loss. Like, this was also a very Browns loss in another way. Like, even when there were 6 minutes to go, I'm like, this loss is going to hurt really bad. And, guess what? It ends up happening. And just the way that it came together, it just sucked. But, certainly not something to put. It's definitely not on the shoulders of Gabriel. He could have done a little bit more, but I thought he did enough to get the Browns a victory.
Yeah, and I think the conversation should sort of pivot next to what didn't work offensively, because there was still, and I think this goes back to what Kevin Stefanski said when he made the change just in general, right? Everybody has to play better. He put it on everyone. He was like, it's not just about this one guy or this one person. He kept saying that line. I think that was very much true in this game, because you still had a crucial drop by Jerry Jeudy on a third down play that would have helped the drive in the first half. You still have the they were 3 of 15 on third down today in this game. Like, there was just a lot that still wasn't right, and some key moment where an offensive lineman just lets a guy through to get a sack on Gabriel. Like, there was still the same issues we've talked about the first couple of weeks were still there. They were less harmful today because you had a quarterback that was a little more effective, especially moving around in the pocket. But in general, a lot of the same problems still persisted. And so I think that spoke to what Kevin was alluding to all week of, it's on all of us. It's not just one guy, and Dylan certainly couldn't do it all alone today. And I think that sort of bared itself out on the field. Like, those same problems persist, and that's another reason why the team lost today. There's some positives there. I thought, like you said, Gabriel played solid. The run game was fantastic today. Quinshon Judkins, 4.8 yards per carry. He became the first Browns player ever in franchise history to have at least 70 or more yards in their first from scrimmage in their first 4 games of their career. So that's something Nick Chubb never did, because obviously early on in his career, Hugh Jackson was always so reluctant to even play Nick Chubb for whatever reason. But regardless, like, there was a lot of things to like from today. There was the same problems that we've talked about for several weeks with this offense, in terms of the way that they were effective until a point, and you thought they were going to get it done today, but then it was those things that seemed to cost them in the long run.
Yeah, Jerm, also 10 penalties for 78 yards, and a lot of them.
Yeah, I forgot the penalties. The penalties are bad today.
And a lot of them were, a lot of them were BS. Like, the one big one that stands out, you referenced it, them not turning that fumble, the fourth quarter fumble, into points. Well, Shelby Harris gets an unnecessary roughness because he gets his leg twisted up at the bottom of a pile and he kicks the dude off of him. He somehow gets a penalty on that. Instead of starting at the 50-yard line, they're starting at the 30. And that changes everything. Every time Justin Jefferson, we gave him his flowers just a little bit ago, every time their ball is thrown his way and he doesn't catch it, there's a penalty on the play, regardless of what happens. There was two pass interferences drawn on Greg Newsome. So, like, that was crazy. There was a lot of just weird stuff. Like, Browns get a huge gainer, and Jack Conklin gets called for illegal formation. And he was like, you can look at the replay and he's maybe a centimeter off of where he's supposed to
be. They called that 2 times because Cam Robinson earlier in the game, they were sort of rotating him and KT Levinston, and he got called on back-to-back plays for a false start, and then that same thing, which is that it's the play they're really cracking down on. They don't want the lineman almost like feathering out too far off the line of scrimmage. They have to be within a certain mark, and clearly he wasn't, and it happened to Jack Conklin, like you said too. So,
and that was not good. Like, you're supposed to get a warning. Hey, you're too far back. Next time it's a penalty. Like, that's pretty much the protocol for that. And instead they were just chucking penalty flags, which in my opinion, there was a lot of BS out there, but it kind of comes back to bite the Browns. But ultimately, like, I think one of the big positives that you take away from today is the rookies are still awesome. Carson Schlesinger led the way in tackles with 12. He's only going to continue to get better. Like there were some things early, he got juked out once. He took a bad angle on another. And he's just going to continue to get better. But he's just like around the ball at all times, which is fantastic. Quinshon Judkins was amazing. 21 carries, 110 yards, a touchdown. Or no, he didn't score. He had that big long touchdown called back again by a holding. Yeah. But he was good. Harold Fannin was solid. But
his first career touchdown for Harold Fannin Jr.
And for Dylan Gabriel, which was pretty cool.
That was his second.
Oh, DG, yeah, DG threw that one
because he threw that one against the Ravens. Yeah,
that's right. To Dylan Sampson, which Sampson was kind of getting involved again as well.
As you're talking about this though, Megs, one thing that stands out is like how much we're talking about the rookies, right? Yeah. And so like it's crazy how this team is so dependent on those guys already to make an impact. And now it takes on another level because now your quarterback that you're starting, like they're not making a change, obviously, is also a rookie. Like this team is so dependent on those players to perform, which is both for this year. There's going to be growing pains, so you're probably going to lose some games because of that. But at the same time, it is a positive, I think, in terms of like the future and where things are headed moving forward, no doubt.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that, and like that's the foundational stuff that you look at. And like, hey, if anything, like if we want to be true about this, like this is a good loss. Like Browns improved their draft position for next year, and they were
competitive.
Competitive.
Yeah, I always think that's funny. Like the way we look at those things, this probably was like a Browns fan dream to a degree, where it's like, hey, we look better. We're excited about Dylan Gabriel now, but draft position is gonna be better. Before we get to the defense and sort of the inconsistencies on that side of the ball today, I also think one last thing from the offensive side has to be like Kevin Stefanski's conservativeness, because listen, I get why he was doing it, and I think it was valuable in a game like this where you're starting a rookie quarterback, and it largely worked for most of the game. Yeah. But I just thought in that fourth quarter, especially you get the ball with 3:27 to go in the fourth, and you're punting it back to the Vikings 22 seconds later. You milked 22 seconds, and you didn't even make them burn all three of their timeouts, which would have been, also valuable. I think it worked until it didn't. And I think, I don't know if we're going to it's not really, I don't know if we should like dole out percentages of like who gets the blame for this loss or whatever. I think that's kind of silly, but I think Kevin Stefanski has to be on that. If they're doing like a pie chart, he has to be on there because listen, I applaud him for the way he handled this game for most of it and setting up Dylan Gabriel for success. I thought he did some really nice things and called the right plays. He was pulling a lot of the right strings today, but in that final sort of crunch time, it just felt like he was too afraid to let Dylan sort of go win the game for you. Mm-hmm. He I don't know. It just didn't. He was conservative almost to a fault at the end of the game. I get like you were trusting your run game to a degree. You wanted them to burn their timeouts, but you also, you could have run a play that's like an easy completion that is going to be completed that maybe gets you some chunk yards and then still keeps the clock moving. I don't know. Like I understand it's a growing moment because it's Dylan Gabriel and you're not trying to like put too much on him, but you had a chance to kind of ice the game there and you didn't take advantage. And so I just thought like the play calling kind of got away from him at the end and sort of cost them in the end because he was being so conservative.
No, I mean,
maybe you disagree. That's just how I feel.
I don't disagree, but like the problem is I don't disagree, but then you're like, all right, if you don't disagree, what's the answer? And not you specifically, but like what's the answer? And I put myself in the play caller shoes. Your running game's good. You're averaging 5 a pop. Like you're running it good. Obviously that's weighted by some big chunk plays, but all you need to do is get 10 yards. And are you going to put it in Quinshon's hands, who's been running it well? Or are you going to drop back with your rookie quarterback who's throwing to receivers who can't catch anything? And, that you're really your answer there is find a way to get David Njoku or find a way to get Harold Fannin a first down opportunity. Like that's got to be your answer. I don't know, man. Like it's a tough spot to be in because you got to commit. The problem was you got to commit to one, right? Either you're going to only burn 22 seconds and they're not going to carry a timeout into their final drive, or you're going to go try to push for a first down. The problem was he tried to do both, and instead they you burn 20 seconds off the clock, and they have a timeout left, and you're like, well, we're screwed because they also still have the 2-minute warning, and you've given them 4 shots now that they failed at. So like you're gonna have to pull a rabbit out of your hat, kind of. It's just like, man, I don't know what the right answer is, but what they did today wasn't it.
Yeah, you're right. It's a tough situation. I'm not saying it's easy. And I think largely Kevin Stefanski had a really good, had an overall good game calling the plays for Dylan. But I don't know, man. Like I thought when it came down to crunch time, and part of this is too like experience factor. Kevin O'Connell has a veteran quarterback. I thought Wentz a couple times today looked like 2019 MVP candidate Carson Wentz today. He made some really big throws today.
I was hoping we were going to get the Washington football team version of him. Where he threw 2 picks.
He was bad in Washington.
And yeah, I mean, man.
But listen, like I thought Kevin trusted Wentz more than Kevin sort of did Gabriel at times, which again makes sense because they're in very different phases of their career. But I did think, like, as Kevin O'Connell gets praised as being one of the best offensive minds of the game, I just thought he was a little bit better than Kevin today, and that's notable because he gets compared to those guys at the end of the day.
I'd argue,
and it was a banged up Vikings team with not a very healthy offensive line right now, and they found a way to win. So that speaks for itself to a degree. Let's go to the defensive side though, Megs, because obviously this was without question, I think, the worst performance for the defense today. When you factor in, like, yes, I understand, like, the scoreboard, the Vikings didn't score as many points as the Lions did or as many points as the Ravens did, but we know there's context to how those teams scored those points. There's a lot of turnovers in those games, a lot of short fields they had to defend in those games, just a lot of issues in general. In this game, that was not the case. The defense had to defend a lot of long fields, and they did for most of this game. I thought third quarter in particular, they got back to being the unit that they normally are. Even most of the fourth quarter, they were that group. You had Malik Collins getting a sack. You had the tandem of Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire forcing a fumble today. Like that, those two continue to thrive opposite of Myles Garrett. Like that was good to see. So there was a lot to like, but there was also a lot to not like. And it culminates with the Vikings marching down the field in crunch time after they get the ball back with 3:05 to go and scoring a game-winning touchdown. I thought we'll get to the last play here in a second, but listen, like it was just disappointing because the Browns defense has been so good that today in some key spots, they couldn't finish the job. And I think what you saw was the flaw in the machine here, right? When you bank on your defense being perfect every single week, sometimes they're not going to be. Sometimes they're going to have like a dud at performance. And when you're flying across the world to go play a game in London 5 hours ahead, different times and all that, it was the perfect recipe for that to sort of be the case. And so I was disappointed with that group today because they couldn't get the stops in the key moments. But at the same time, like they've carried this team so much, I don't know how you really walk away all that mad at them because like they still did almost enough to win this game for you. You just needed a little bit more from the offense once again.
Yeah, it's funny. I referenced it earlier. It felt like a little bit of a roller coaster. I thought they started bad. Like the Vikings were running it on them. They were struggling to create pressure on Carson Wentz, and that was, I think, in large part due to Kevin O'Connell being just an absolute mastermind. I think he's one of the best, and I'm not alone in this, but he's one of the best play callers in all of the sport. And he was exposing things like, I think back to the one play that was just sneaky enough. It was they were in the I formation, and like the running back took one step forward, like he was going to go up the middle, put his foot in the ground, and then Carson Wentz pitched it out to him. They used Alex Wright's tendency to crash down super hard against him, and it's just like little things like that add up when you're playing a defense like that, because like you said, the Browns rely on them to be perfect, and when you face a great play caller who's really good at executing and setting his guys up for success, stuff like that tends to happen. And and I think that they started bad, they got much better. They started getting pressure on the quarterback, they started stopping the run. But in that fourth quarter, you ask them to get 4 stops in a quarter. Truth be told, the Vikings went 1 for 4 in the quarter and had a fumble and had 2 punts. Like, sign me up for that every single time. That's job well done. The problem is the score came with 25 seconds left and on a huge long drive. And it's like, man, you can't blame the defense, but also too, the defense had a chance to win the game and they just couldn't make that final play. It's tough.
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I mean, and like usually you can trust that group, especially in those spots. It was frustrating, but you're also not going to like pin this one largely on them when they still did their job for most of the game. It was just again the key moments is where you noticed they were struggling. That last play, again, I don't always like critiquing plays because we don't always know the call, we don't always know who's doing what. But my read on it was that it was cover 2. Hickman has that deep half. And I thought because Denzel looked like he was in man, at least initially, he should have forced Addison inside to make it an easier play for Hickman to get over and get there. Because he's running from like the middle of the field to, or like, the shadow of the goalpost all the way to the far side of the end zone. That's a hard place to get to. I kind of put it on both of them. I don't want to. This is without full context, so I want to make that clear. I'm curious to hear like what's kind of said after the game about that play and. Talk to the guys a little bit about like what was, what needed to happen there, I guess. But I think it was a little bit of a mistake in coverage there of some sort that leads to the touchdown. And you haven't got a lot of those lapses this year from this Browns defense.
No, I mean, okay, let's play in a world where we'll talk hypothetically that was cover 2, right? Let's just call it, let's say it was cover 2.
Yeah.
If that is the case, Denzel Ward, is 125% his fault on that. The one rule as a cornerback, when you have that flat, when it's the flat surface and you have the flat, you absolutely positively cannot let the wide receiver get outside of you and watch it back. The snap of the ball, Denzel doesn't get a hand on him, doesn't even like hinder his route.
Yeah.
Jordan Addison just literally drifts behind him. And once you get behind him, Germ, he's in his blind spot. He can't see it. And then he just drifts to the corner. Impossible for the safety to get over top of it. And that's one of those where it's like, as a quarterback, you're like, did he just let this happen? I'm just going to throw a touchdown right over here because it's not supposed to happen. That part to me is the most frustrating part because you learn that as a 10-year-old, right? The first time you ever put in cover 2, corners are told, do not let anybody outside of you ever under any circumstance. And in the biggest play of the game, our best player lets that happen, and it costs us the win. That to me was the most frustrating and disappointing part of this whole thing.
It almost felt like Ward thought like Wentz can't make this throw or something too.
Right.
And he was
exactly.
like, I'm going to pick this off. And then it didn't.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and point the finger because, again, we don't know the full coverage. We don't know what was called. We can't speculate on those things, even though we're speculating on those things. But I think it was a frustrating play because it looked like somebody just wasn't doing totally what they were supposed to do.
Germ, you could see
and it leads to the game-winning touchdown. Go ahead.
Germ, you could see the oh shit moment where he's like looking, he's like, oh, that's perfect. And you can like literally see it when he's like, oh, I got to stick my hand up, and it's like the ball drops right over top of him, and he just waltzes into the end zone, and it's game over. It's that part, that one. If that is the case in my hypothetical world that I created, that they were playing cover 2 there, that's a bad one.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to sort of end this podcast because I think in general, bad one in terms of the game ending the way that it did. It felt like a positive day overall. I think Browns fans were excited about the team potentially coming home with a win.
I said playoffs this morning.
Oh, yeah, you did say playoffs. I forgot about that.
Playoffs this morning.
Well, that was your bad take, not mine.
Million people at my house.
We both picked the Browns to win though, and it felt like they were going to pull it off for most of that one. They come away with a loss, dropped to 1-4 on the season, 21-17. And yeah, a positive Dylan Gabriel debut as a starter ends in sort of sad fashion for Browns fans because of the defense sort of lapsing there in the final minutes. And maybe Kevin Stefanski being a little bit too conservative. But if you liked our reaction, if you like what we had to say, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Cleveland Browns Roundtable right here on YouTube, where many of you might be watching this right now. Also, head on over to our website, roundtable.io/sports/NFL/Browns. We got some good stuff in the community posts during the game that you can check out. We also got you covered. I know my column went up already. I'm sure there's going to be some other stuff from post game that goes up on the site there as well. So check all that out. And join our community if you haven't done so already as well, because each week we're going to try to grow this thing and really give you a place where you can sort of talk and communicate and converse throughout the game and even vent a little bit afterwards if you're you're upset about how things play out. So
I could use
any final thoughts, Meg?
I could use a conversation if anybody's up for it. So
yeah, we're here to be your therapist in a way. That's going to do it for Anthony Moeglin. I'm Spencer German. We'll be back in Berea this week as we get you ready for week 6 of the season, going to Pittsburgh. It's a big one. That team that everybody hates in town. But in the meantime, we appreciate you jumping in with us. We appreciate you following along, and keep on following along with all things Cleveland Browns with the Cleveland Browns Roundtable.